Paul misquoted the Bible. No, seriously, he did. But let me tell you why I think God was okay with it. In Ephesians 4, Paul quotes Psalm 68:18. Psalm 68 says that God took gifts from men. Paul says that God gave gifts to men. It's a direct misquote. Let's look at this ancient practice because I believe it can reveal why Paul did what he did. When a king would conquer a territory, he would make a decree. He would tell his soldiers, take everything. Now the conquered territory is his to do whatever he wants with. He would often go home, step up to his throne, and he would give it to his people. That's what Paul said Jesus did. He conquered, he took, he ascended, and he gave. He's saying that Christ has sanctified the spoils of hell, and he has weaponized them for the church. And there's an ancient source we're going to look at that proves that Paul changed his word on purpose. In Ephesians 4:8, here's the text. The Hebrew says, you ascended on high, you led captivity captive, you took gifts from men. But Paul writes, he ascended on high, he led captivity captive, he gave gifts to men. One said took, the other said gave. Opposite verbs in the same verse. So did Paul just get sloppy? No, Paul was the West Hoof of his day, trained under Gamaliel in Jerusalem. We can be pretty sure that he did it on purpose. There's an ancient Aramaic translation of the psalm called the Targum. Think of it like a study Bible for the synagogue. It didn't translate the Hebrew, but it interpreted it. And the Targum of Psalm 68:18 does something wild. It changes the same word that Paul changed. The Targum reads, you ascended to the firmament, prophet Moses. You led captivity captive. You learned the words of Torah. You gave them as gifts to the Son of Men. The Targum had a reading of Moses climbing Mount Sinai, receiving the law from God, then coming back down and giving it to the people. Paul wasn't committing heresy. Paul was working inside of an interpretive tradition that had been reading Psalm 68 this way for generations. But then he says, hold my codex. The man swapped Moses for Jesus. Same platform, but a bigger cosmic scale. Don't miss what's going on here because it unfolds like a John Grisham novel. In the Talmud, in Shabbat 88b, it records this. Moses ascends to the throne room and the angels lose their mind. What is one born of a woman doing among us? They called the Torah a hidden treasure. They said it had been guarded in heaven for 974 generations before the earth was even created. And they weren't about to hand it over to some mortal made of dirt. So God tells Moses to answer them. And Moses does something brilliant. He doesn't claim to be worthy. He doesn't argue that he's strong enough to take it. He weaponizes his weakness. He approaches them and he says, does the Torah say, honor your father and mother? Do you have parents? Does it say you shall not murder? Do you have evil impulse? Does it command Sabbath rest? Do you do physical labor? One by one, the angels go silent and walk away. This was Moses right in the dirt moment. He reminded them that the Torah was written for broken people, not for celestial beings. But here's the punchline. The angels don't just concede. They line up and they give Moses gifts. It was tribute from the defeated. Even the angel of death gives them a secret formula that is said to stop plagues. And Aaron would use that exact same formula in number 16, standing between the living and the dead and stopping a plague right there in its tracks. Death handed over the weapon that will be used against it. So what we're seeing here is a mortal walking into the heavenly court, outwitting the guardians and walking back down the mountain carrying the spoils. Now hold on to that image of the angels handed over tribute to a mortal that beat them in their own courtroom, because we're going to apply that to a Roman parade. Give me 90 seconds and I'm going to show you why Paul picked that psalm. Paul is writing to Ephesus, a Roman city, and everybody in that city knew what a victory procession looked like. When a Roman general won a decisive victory, the Senate would grant him a triumph. This was a parade that would go through the city. The general would ride in this big chariot, and behind him, the captives will be chained up, stripped of their weapons and all of their dignity, on display for the whole city to see, and the spoils of war will be carried through the streets. Then the general ascends to the temple, gives an offering of the spoils to the gods, and distributes the plunder among the people. Think about the Ark de Titus in Rome. It was built in 82 AD. It has a scene like this carved in stone. Titus triumphed after the destruction of Jerusalem, and right there in the relief panel, you can see the Roman soldiers carrying the 7-branch menorah from the temple through the streets of Rome. The most sacred object in Jerusalem, paraded as a war trophy. That's what the image of every person in Ephesus carried in their head when Paul wrote Ephesians chapter 4. You see where this is going? Paul is painting this exact picture. Christ is a general. The captives trailing behind him in chains aren't human prisoners. Colossians 2:5 says that he disarmed the rulers and authorities, made a public spectacle of them, triumphed over them. The cosmic powers thought they had him. The cross looked like their victory, and it was the biggest miscalculation in the history of the universe. Because the cross was never their triumph, it was his, and the resurrection was the parade. Before Christ ascended, he first descended into the lower parts of the earth. From the prison of the watchers to the right hand of the throne, he goes from the bottom to the top. Verse 10 says that he descended so that he might fulfill all things. That's floor to ceiling, lowest point to the highest. That's not poetry, that's a conquest claim. The bigger the territory covered, the bigger the haul. Moses went up one mountain and he came back down with the Torah for a nation. Christ went from the bottom of the abyss to the right hand of the Father. That's a different scale of territory, which means it's a different scale of treasury. I'm glad you're still with me because this is where it all comes together. The timing isn't an accident. Moses climbed Sinai. He argued with the angels. He came back down and gave the Torah to Israel. That happened on the 50th day after the Exodus. The Jewish tradition calls it Shabbat. It's the Feast of Weeks. You know what the Greek word for that feast is? Pentecost. 50 days after the cross, the Holy Spirit comes down in an upper room with a mighty rushing wind and flaming tongues of fire. It's the same feast. It's the same pattern. It's a new covenant. And if you're tracking this, we're almost there. Think about Babel. God scattered the nations, and what did he do? He confused their languages. Now look at Pentecost. The Holy Spirit falls. Every nation present hears the gospel in their own language. Babel divided. Pentecost reunited. The Torah was the first distribution given through Moses to one nation. But at Pentecost, God didn't send a gift. He came himself. And through the Holy Spirit, he brings gifts distributed not to one nation, but poured out on all flesh. So what does a victorious king give his people? I'm glad you asked. Because just like the first Sinai, there's a practical next step. When Moses brought the people out of Egypt, he quickly realized that he couldn't lead them alone. The burden was too heavy. So God took the spirit that was on Moses and distributed it to 70 elders. Moses had to organize the people. He had to find leaders that could equip this newly freed nation for the wilderness. Christ is doing the same thing with spiritual gifts, but on a cosmic scale. The spiritual gifts aren't just for church growth questionnaires. They're not personality assessment. They're not a flow chart for a staff meeting. They're spoils of war, taken from the depths of a conquered enemy and given to the people by a conquering king. Every apostle planting a church in a hostile territory, that's Christ's victory being distributed. Every prophet standing up and declaring what God is doing right now, it's another spoil of war, taken straight from the enemy's treasury. Every evangelist pulling somebody out of darkness, that's plunder from the enemy's camp showing up in your neighborhood. Every pastor sitting in the hospital room at 2 a.m. with a grieving family, and you say that one prayer that needed to be prayed, that's war spoils. Every teacher that's discipling someone so deep in the word that the lie can't stick, that's a war spoil. You have been armed, and Paul tells us exactly how long the distribution lasts. These gifts are given until we reach unity in the faith and in the knowledge of the Son of God. Until, friends, that condition hasn't been met yet. The body isn't fully built yet, which means the distribution hasn't stopped running. Not when there's one left unreached, not while there's others in chains. The spoils aren't for museums. They're for battlefields, for the whole body, every member, equipped and deployed. Christ went into the prison, he confronted the powers, he announced their defeat, and he ascended far above all heavens. So let me ask you one last question. In this courtroom, if Christ is the judge and the angels are on trial, then what are we? Next video, there's a Greek word for witness. It's the same word that we get martyr from. And right now we're seeing that becoming a witness can get you killed. People are still testifying though. That's not a coincidence. That's the spoils of war doing exactly what they were designed to do. I'll see you in the next one. God bless you.